The Billionaire's Bride, swap, a secret, a son, a scandal, before we dive into this powerful love story. Hey, sweet family, and welcome to all the new faces. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far this love spreads. Don't forget to like, comment, and hit that follow button if you enjoy stories full of drama, emotion, twists, and true love. All right, are you ready to feel everything? Let's begin. The scent of champagne roses filled the air as soft string music echoed through the arched ceilings of the historic Napa Valley Chapel. Guests in designer suits and glittering gowns leaned forward with anticipation. Camera phones ready, the hush before the biggest society wedding of the year. Graham Maddox, tech mogul, billionaire bachelor, and media darling, stood at the altar in a custom black tux, his piercing blue eyes fixed on the grand double doors. Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. The doors finally opened. A collective sigh swept through the room. The bride appeared, draped in white, her veil thick and low, face hidden. But her steps were unsteady. Her hands trembled against the bouquet. Her posture wasn't proud, it was afraid. Graham frowned. Something was off. Whispers rippled through the chapel like a current. The bride moved closer, her body rigid. When she reached the altar, she didn't meet his eyes. Her breath was shaky. Something in Graham's chest stirred, an instinct honed in boardrooms and battles. This wasn't Vanessa. He leaned in, voice like steel. "Who the hell are you?" The bride flinched. Then, with a trembling hand, she lifted the veil. A hush fell over the entire chapel. The woman standing before him was not Vanessa Sterling. She was younger, with rich brown skin, tear-rimmed hazel eyes, and soft curls pinned back beneath the tiara. She looked terrified, and heartbreakingly beautiful. I'm not supposed to be here," she whispered. "My name is Jasmine Carter. I was told this was just a rehearsal. I didn't know." Graham's jaw clenched as cameras began flashing wildly. Guests gasped. Somewhere in the back, a woman screamed. It was chaos. "Where is Vanessa?" he demanded. "I don't know," Jasmine said, backing away. "Please, I didn't plan this. I was tricked. I swear to you, I didn't mean for this to happen." For a man who built his empire on logic and control, Graham Maddox was never the type to act on impulse. But in this moment, with Jasmine trembling before him and the entire world watching, something in him broke. He turned to the priest and the crowd. "This wedding is over," he said coldly. Then he took Jasmine's hand, not with anger, but with quiet command, and led her out of the church, past the cameras, and into a future neither of them saw coming. The silence in the car was thicker than the fog rolling over the Napa hills. Jasmine sat with her hands clenched tightly in her lap, still wearing the wedding gown that didn't belong to her. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a war drum. Beside her, Graham Maddox gripped the steering wheel of his matte black Aston Martin, his chiseled jaw set in stone. He hadn't said a word since they'd left the chapel, just drove, fast and sharp, as if trying to outrun the chaos behind them. They arrived at his estate, an architectural marvel perched on a private cliffside. It loomed like a fortress, beautiful and intimidating, much like the man himself. Jasmine hesitated at the front doors, but he didn't wait for her. He strode inside, and she followed, swallowing her fare. The doors shut behind them with a cold finality. "Start talking," Graham snapped, turning on her like a storm. "Who sent you? Who benefits from this circus?" "I told you, I don't know." Jasmine's voice shook, but she stood tall. I was told I was filling in for a rehearsal. I thought it was a modelling gig for a charity. I didn't know I'd be standing in front of a crowd about to marry a billionaire. Graham's eyes narrowed, icy and assessing. You expect me to believe that? No, she said, raising her chin. But it's the truth. Believe it or don't. I didn't ask for this. That stopped him. She wasn't begging. She wasn't scheming. She looked furious and brave. He stepped closer. You humiliated me. And I was humiliated too, she bit back. I was shoved into a dress and pushed through those doors like a pawn in someone else's game. A tense silence stretched between them. Two strangers pulled into the same storm. Finally, Graham exhaled and pinched the bridge of his nose. You're staying here, he muttered. What? Jasmine blinked. Until I figure out who's behind this. His voice was all steel again. You'll have your own room. I'll have you watched. Don't get comfortable. She squared her shoulders. Don't worry. I'm not. Outside, paparazzi swarmed the estate gates. Social media exploded with headlines. Billionaire's bride swap. Who is the mystery woman? Inside, two lives were unraveling, and neither of them knew just how tangled things were about to become. Graham stood in his study, his back to Jasmine, as he stared out the towering windows, the vineyard below swallowed in morning fog. His phone buzzed on the mahogany desk beside him. Reporters, investors, lawyers. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted blood. Vanessa Sterling had vanished. His wedding had turned into a global spectacle. And in the middle of it all stood Jasmine Carter, the woman who wasn't supposed to exist in his world. She lingered in the doorway, wearing clothes one of his housekeepers had laid out, simple jeans and a soft sweater. But there was nothing soft about her gaze. She was tired, angry, but unbroken. He turned slowly, his blue eyes locking onto hers. My PR team is spinning this as an elaborate wedding prank. They're calling you a performance artist. I'm not. Her voice was steady. I'm a person, a woman, not your media scapegoat. Graham nodded. That's why I'm making you an offer. Jasmine folded her arms. What kind of offer? You stay here, in the mansion. You pretend to be part of this story, for now. In exchange, I use every resource I have to help you find out who did this to you. And to me. She stared at him. And what do you get out of it? My empire back, he said simply. A stable narrative. Damage control. But make no mistake, this is a deal, not a favor. Jasmine considered it for a long, heavy moment. Then she stepped into the study, chin raised high. I'll stay, she said, but on my terms. Graham arched a brow. I'm listening. I won't be your puppet. I'm not here to smile for cameras or play mystery bride. I want truth and respect. Her voice sharpened. I might be in your home, but I'm not yours. For the first time since she arrived, Graham's lips curved into the faintest smirk, not mocking, impressed. Noted, he said. You're not what I expected. Good, Jasmine replied, because I'm not here to fit your expectations. And with that, the power between them shifted, just slightly. Enough for him to feel it, enough for her to know it. Somewhere, deep beneath the scandal and secrets, the game had just begun. And neither of them played to lose. The knock at the door came late, past midnight, when even the paparazzi had gone quiet, and the mansion's hallways slept under shadows. Graham opened it himself, surprised to find a gaunt woman swaying on the marble steps. Her sunken eyes were rimmed in pain, skin pale and glistening with fever. Behind her stood a small boy with dark curls, a Spider-Man backpack clutched tightly to his chest. She whispered his name. Graham. He recognized her instantly. Sienna Blake, a flame from years ago. The memory of one reckless night at a Vegas tech gala hit him like a punch to the ribs. Before he could speak, she dropped to her knees. "I don't have time," she rasped. "Stage 4 cancer. They gave me weeks. I had to bring him. He's your son." Graham froze. The boy looked up with wide, green-blue eyes. His eyes. Same angle to the jaw. Same furrow in the brow. Sienna coughed violently, clutching her side. "His name is Aiden. He doesn't know who you are, but I had no one else. You're all he has now." Jasmine appeared at the top of the stairs in a robe, her face soft with concern. She rushed forward as Graham stood paralyzed, torn between denial and dawning truth. "Come inside," Jasmine said gently, wrapping an arm around the frail woman. She looked at the boy. "Hey there, sweetheart. You hungry?" Aiden nodded cautiously. While Sienna rested in the guest suite, Jasmine sat with Aiden in the kitchen, making him a peanut butter sandwich and asking about his favorite superhero. The boy's shoulders relaxed. He laughed, a shy, beautiful sound. Graham stood in the doorway, watching. He had built empires, silenced competitors, walked through fire. But nothing had shaken him like this. Not the scandal, not even Vanessa's betrayal. This was blood. His son. And Jasmine. She wasn't panicked. She was nurturing, strong. She met the moment like she'd been born for it. Later, when Jasmine tucked Aiden into bed and turned to leave, Graham finally spoke. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said. "But he needed someone. And so did you." For the first time, Graham didn't see her as the woman who'd crashed his altar. He saw her as the calm in his chaos, maybe even his second chance. The morning air in Napa Valley was unusually still. A quiet tension clung to the Maddox estate, like a fog, thicker than the mist that hung above the vineyards. Inside the sprawling mansion, the luxurious rooms were hushed, the staff moving in subdued tones, fully aware that something beneath the surface was unraveling. Jasmine Carter hadn't slept much, even after everything. The swapped wedding, the media frenzy, the bombshell reveal of Graham's secret son. Her mind refused to rest. Something didn't sit right with her. Vanessa's sudden disappearance wasn't just a runaway bride scandal. No, it felt too clean, too orchestrated, too quiet. Jasmine paced the length of the sunroom, her bare feet whispering against the polished marble floor. She wore one of her new outfits, an oversized cream sweater and soft lounge pants, courtesy of Graham's assistant. She didn't care about the designer label stitched on the hem. She cared about answers. She grabbed her laptop and began digging, her fingers flying over the keyboard. She scoured Vanessa's old social media accounts, Instagram, Facebook, even a Pinterest board titled Dream Wedding Vibes. But all of it had been wiped clean the morning after the wedding. No trace of Vanessa, no updates, no forwarded emails, no digital footprints. Jasmine's frustration mounted. She wasn't just some woman Graham had accidentally married. She had been shoved into this storm, and she refused to let herself be used. Not again. She moved from tab to tab, searching for something, anything, that didn't fit. And then she found it. Buried deep in an archived email chain between Vanessa and her wedding planner was a forwarded message. Jasmine clicked it open. It was from someone named Royce Kessler. The name sent a chill down her spine. The email was brief, but cryptic. A message sent at 2:03 a.m., 3 weeks before the wedding. Everything's in place. Just remember the timeline. Don't get cold feet now, V. Vanessa. Jasmine frowned, scanning the sender's email. Royce Kessler. She'd heard that name before. Somewhere in one of the news reports Graham had briefly mentioned over dinner. He was a powerful investor, known in the financial world for shady deals, shell companies, and hostile takeovers. But why was a man like that emailing Vanessa before her wedding? Jasmine copied the name and opened a new tab. Within seconds, the search engine exploded with results. Royce Kessler, CEO of Kessler Holdings, known associate of multiple corporate fraud cases, accused of embezzlement, bribery, and insider trading, rumored connections to Eastern European financial cartels. This wasn't just a businessman. He was a predator in a tailored suit. Jasmine's heart thudded in her chest. Her fingers trembled as she clicked through articles, uncovering a web of investments that crossed international lines. Offshore accounts, shell companies, quiet lawsuits that had mysteriously vanished. And then she found something that made her stomach drop. One of Kessler's shell companies had attempted to buy a controlling share in Maddox Technologies 6 months ago. Graham had refused, publicly, fiercely. So what if Royce couldn't get to the company? But he could get to the man behind it. Through Vanessa. Jasmine sat back, trying to connect the dots. Vanessa hadn't just disappeared. She had been silenced. Or worse, she had willingly vanished because the truth was too dangerous. She grabbed her laptop and stormed down the hallway, heart pounding in her chest. She didn't knock on Graham's study door. She threw it open. Graham looked up from behind a mountain of documents, his blue eyes immediately locking onto hers. "Didn't realize you'd taken up breaking and entering," he muttered. But the teasing didn't land. Jasmine slammed the laptop down in front of him and turned it to face him. "Do you know this man?" she asked, pointing to Royce's picture. Graham's jaw tightened, his expression darkened. "Unfortunately. I think he's behind Vanessa's disappearance," Jasmine said. "And I think she was helping him, at least for a while." Graham stared at the screen, his mind working faster than his mouth. "Royce has been circling my company for years. I turned him down, repeatedly, and every time he tried another angle, more aggressive, more invasive." "He found a new angle," Jasmine said softly. "Her." There was a pause. The truth was heavy, ugly, but undeniable, and Jasmine had uncovered it in hours. Graham stood and walked to the window, running a hand through his thick hair. "My entire security team couldn't find a damn lead on her, and you walked in here and cracked it wide open." "I didn't come here to play house," Jasmine said, folding her arms. "This mess was thrown at me, but now I'm in it. I won't be passive." Graham turned, and for a long beat he just looked at her. "You could have left. You could have walked away." "I'm not built to run," she said. "And maybe that's what makes me different." Graham stepped closer. There was no charm in his face now, no arrogance, just something raw. Respect, gratitude, maybe even awe. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." Jasmine lifted her chin. "Good, because I'm not here to be someone you've already known." A soft smile threatened the corners of his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not yet. The shadows were still there. Vanessa's betrayal. Aiden's sudden presence. The world watching every move they made. But for the first time, he didn't feel like he was standing in the ruins of his old life. He felt like maybe, just maybe, something stronger was rising in its place. And Jasmine? She wasn't just surviving it. She was leading the charge. The thunder rolled across the hills of Napa Valley like a warning shot from the heavens. Wind howled through the vineyards, bending the vines like dancers in mourning. Rain lashed the windows of the Maddox estate, casting streaks of silver across the glass like tears that refused to stop falling. Inside, the air was warmer, but only just. Jasmine Carter stood in the hallway outside Aidan's room, watching Graham tuck his son into bed. The boy had grown comfortable with her in a way she hadn't expected. He reached for her hand during mealtimes. He asked her to read to him. He called her Miss Jazz with sleepy affection that tugged at something tender inside her. But tonight, it was Graham who asked for the bedtime story. And Jasmine, curious, had lingered. Graham's deep voice softened as he read from the pages of a battered old copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. His arm curled protectively around the small boy. Aidan drifted off mid-sentence, his breathing steady and peaceful. Graham pulled the blanket up to the boy's chin and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. Jasmine didn't move. Couldn't. Because in that moment, she didn't see a billionaire. She didn't see a man whose empire had been rocked by betrayal or whose name trended online every other hour. She saw a father, and it broke her in the most beautiful way. When Graham finally stepped out into the hallway and saw her there, something unspoken passed between them. "Didn't mean to intrude," she said softly. "You weren't," he replied, voice husky. "He sleeps better when you're near." They walked down the hall in silence, the tension between them no longer hostile, but charged with something more delicate, something fragile, something almost sacred. In the kitchen, Jasmine poured them both tea. The storm outside intensified. Lightning lit up the sky, and thunder cracked seconds later. The power flickered, but held. "You ever scared of storms?" Graham asked, watching her closely as they sat across from each other at the long, candle-lit dining table. Jasmine smiled faintly. "Only the kind that leave no warning." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, those are the worst." They sipped in silence for a while, until Graham leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his head. "You know, I used to think being rich would solve everything," he said quietly. "But it didn't stop my parents from screaming at each other every night. Didn't stop my mother from walking out. Or my father from turning cold." Jasmine's heart ached. She hadn't asked for his history. But the fact that he was offering it now felt like a sacred trust. "I never had a real family," he continued. "Boarding schools, nannies, contracts. My life was built in rooms like this, big and beautiful. But empty." Jasmine reached across the table, placing her hand gently over his. "You're not that boy anymore, Graham." He looked up, meeting her gaze. But sometimes I still feel like I am." For a long beat, neither of them spoke. Then it was her turn. "I used to dream of opening a youth foundation," she said, staring at the flickering candlelight. "For kids like me. Foster homes, group homes. I knew what it meant to feel disposable." Graham's eyes softened. "You're the farthest thing from disposable, Jasmine." Something cracked between them. Not broken, opened. A door neither of them had realized was there. The rain continued outside, beating steadily against the glass. The lights flickered again, and this time the power went out entirely. The house was swallowed in darkness, save for the golden flicker of candlelight that danced between their shadows. Without a word, they stood and moved toward the grand staircase. They didn't say where they were going, but their steps were in sync. In the upstairs lounge, with windows looking out over the storm-drenched vineyard, they sat side by side on a deep leather sofa. The lightning flashed, briefly illuminating his profile. The strong jawline, the furrow in his brow, the emotion buried just beneath the surface. "You ever just want to run away from it all?" Jasmine whispered. "All the time," he murmured. "But then I remember what's worth staying for." Before she could ask what he meant, he turned toward her, and the distance that had stretched between them for days, weeks maybe, disappeared. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to stop him. But she didn't. Their lips met, softly at first. A brush, a question. Then the kiss deepened. It wasn't desperate, it wasn't wild. It was slow, reverent, like two people tasting warmth for the first time after years in the cold. His hand slid up her waist, cradling the side of her neck. Her fingers curled into his shirt, anchoring herself in something terrifying and electric. The air around them seemed to still, as if the world outside had paused to give them this moment. But just as quickly as it ignited, Jasmine pulled away, breathing heavy, eyes wide, walls slamming back up. I can't," she whispered, standing quickly. Graham stood too, confused. "Jasmine!" She shook her head, hugging her arms around herself. "I can't be a patch for a broken life. I can't be your rebound or your rescue." "You're not," he said, voice rough. "You're so much more." But she stepped back. Her heartbeat was a drumline in her ears. "You don't know that, and I can't afford to be temporary." Lightning cracked again. Thunder roared in the distance, and with it, the air between them turned colder. Jasmine left the room without another word, disappearing down the hallway like a ghost that refused to be haunted again. And Graham? He stood there, jaw tight, hands clenched, realizing that for the first time, he wanted more than control. He wanted her. But she was slipping through his fingers, and he didn't know how to stop it. The sun had barely touched the horizon when Jasmine's phone buzzed with the message that would change everything. It was from a private investigator she'd quietly hired days earlier. Someone who owed her a favor from a dark corner of her past. Someone who worked fast, silently, and left no digital trails. She stared at the text, her breath catching in her throat. "She's alive. Vanessa Sterling, Switzerland, with a private account under V. Maddox. Attached, proof." Attached were 3 grainy photos. Vanessa, wrapped in a designer coat, oversized sunglasses shielding her face, walking hand in hand with a man Jasmine didn't recognize. The timestamp read 2 days ago. The location? A luxury ski resort just outside Zurich. Jasmine's blood ran cold. She swallowed hard, scrolling further. Bank statements. A wire transfer for $3.2 million drawn from a Maddox Ventures shell account. One no one should have had access to but Graham and a handful of his trusted executives. She was gone. Not kidnapped. Not threatened. Vanessa had orchestrated her own vanishing act, and she'd had help from the inside. Jasmine stared at the screen, heart racing. Her stomach churned with nausea and fury. She couldn't ignore this, couldn't sit on it. But telling Graham wouldn't be easy. Not after the kiss. Not after the way she'd walked out of that room like she hadn't felt the same heat he had. Still, this wasn't about feelings anymore. It was about truth. She printed the documents, tucked them into a sleek black folder, and went to find him. Graham was in his home gym, hammering at a punching bag with raw, precise force. Sweat slicked his skin. his muscles flexing under the strain. But when Jasmine entered, folder in hand, the rhythm of his hits faltered. "We need to talk," she said simply. He grabbed a towel, wiping his face, breath ragged. "About?" "Vanessa." He stilled. Graham dropped the towel. "What about her?" Jasmine opened the folder and laid it on the table. The photos, the bank transactions, the proof. "She's not missing," Jasmine said. "She's hiding, with your money. And she had help. Someone from your team." Silence. Heavy. Dense. Graham's eyes scanned the pages. Then again. Then again. When he finally looked up, there was no gratitude, no shock, only suspicion. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice low. "I had someone look into it." "You went behind my back." "I did what needed to be done." His jaw clenched. "And you didn't think to tell me first." "I didn't have proof until now." "You should have come to me the second you suspected anything." "And let you shut it down out of pride or fear. You don't want the truth, Graham. You want control." The words landed like a slap. His blue eyes darkened. "You think I'm trying to control you? I think you're so used to people doing what you say that when someone doesn't, you take it as betrayal." Graham stepped forward. "This is my life, Jasmine. My company. My name. And I'm not your possession," she snapped. "I walked into your chaos because I had no choice, but I stayed because I believed in the truth. Because I believed in you." His breath hitched. "You crossed a line." "So did Vanessa," Jasmine said, "and someone you trust deeply is helping her bleed you dry, but you're too busy being pissed at me to see that." The silence that followed was brutal. Only the sound of rain starting again outside, soft but insistent against the windows. "I don't need another person keeping secrets from me," Graham finally said. "Not under my roof." Jasmine's heart cracked. "I wasn't keeping secrets. I was uncovering yours." "Then maybe you don't belong here anymore." The words weren't shouted. They weren't angry. They were cold. Final. Jasmine stood still for a moment, her body frozen, but her mind already in motion. She looked at him. Really looked. The man she'd begun to trust, to open up to. The man she had let hold her in the dark while thunder split the sky. "You're right," she whispered. And then she walked out. She didn't slam doors. She didn't cry. She packed her things in silence. Down the hallway, Aidan's voice echoed, laughing with a nanny, unaware of the tremor that had just rocked the foundation beneath them all. Jasmine paused outside his room. Her hand hovered over the doorknob. She wanted to say goodbye. But what would that do to him? To her? She turned away. By nightfall, the mansion was quieter than it had ever been. Graham sat in his office, Jasmine's folder unopened beside him. He hadn't touched it since she left, not because he didn't believe her, because he did. And that terrified him. She had uncovered what his entire security team had failed to find. She had seen the truth when all he saw was betrayal. She had stood in the fire, again, and walked out stronger. And he had let her go. Out of fear, out of pride, out of the same damn wounds he swore had healed. He poured a glass of scotch, his hands shaking for the first time in years. In the distance, lightning split the sky again. But this time, she wasn't there to share the storm. The apartment wasn't much. A 2-bedroom unit tucked above a flower shop in downtown Oakland, with creaky wooden floors and chipped paint on the windowsills. The water pressure was unreliable. The heating groaned at night, and there was no private chef, no security gate, no marble floors reflecting chandeliers. But it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, Jasmine Carter felt free. She stood in the center of the living room, barefoot on the cool floor, watching Aidan race around with a worn-out plush lion clutched to his chest. He was laughing again, smiling more. And every time he looked up and saw her, he ran to hug her like she was the only constant he needed. She didn't ask him to stay. He chose her, and Graham hadn't stopped him. That was the part that hurt. She could still hear the echo of Graham's voice, cold and sharp. Maybe you don't belong here anymore. She had left with her pride intact, but her heart torn at the seams. Now she was stitching her life back together. And this time, the thread was made of steel. It started as an idea scribbled on a napkin during a late-night ramen dinner with her best friend, Layla, a social worker who'd seen more women broken by betrayal than any one person should. What if we created something that actually listened? Jasmine had said, eyes bright despite exhaustion. Not just shelters or hotlines, but a sisterhood. A platform for women who've been abandoned, lied to, left to pick up the pieces. Like we were. Layla stared at her for a long moment. You're serious. Dead serious. And that night, Rise Up Network was born. She poured her soul into it. Every sleepless night became a strategy session. Every ounce of pain turned into purpose. Jasmine built the platform herself, pulling favors, bartering skills, designing a website on a second-hand laptop, while Aidan colored beside her on the floor. The site launched quietly at first. A blog, a helpline, a few anonymous testimonials. Then the press caught wind of her story. Not just the wrong bride scandal, but the part where she walked away. With grace, with fire, with a child in her arms and her head held high. The headlines changed. From bride swap to boss, Jasmine Carter turned scandal into sisterhood. She wasn't supposed to be the bride. Now she's leading a revolution. From Maddox Mansion to Women's Mission, Jasmine Carter's rise. Interviews followed. Donations poured in. And slowly, women from across the country began to share their stories. At night, Jasmine would sit by the window, watching city lights flicker like stars fallen to earth, and wonder how she got here. How a girl raised in the foster system, who once slept in cars, had become a symbol. She didn't feel like a symbol. She felt like a survivor, still bruised, still healing, but standing. And then there was Aidan. He was her shadow, her laughter, her tiny protector. He told his teachers that Jasmine was his forever person. It made her cry the first time she heard it, but it also made her stronger. Meanwhile, miles away, Graham Maddox sat in his high-rise penthouse, watching her rise from the ashes of his silence. He had people feeding him updates, not because he asked, because he couldn't help but want to know. Her website was getting traction. Her support network was gaining corporate sponsors. She had spoken at 2 panels on emotional recovery. She was featured in a podcast that went viral in less than 24 hours, and she had never once said his name. Not in blame, not in bitterness, not even in passing. She protected him, even when he hadn't protected her. Graham watched a clip of her interview one night, glass of bourbon untouched in his hand. "It's not about revenge," she said, wearing a soft brown blazer and natural curls pinned to the side. "Yeah, it's about remembering who you are after someone tries to convince you that you're not enough." The host had leaned forward. "Is there anyone you wish could hear that?" Jasmine smiled, a slow, knowing smile that didn't reach her eyes. He already did. And he still let me go. Graham's chest tightened. He shut the laptop. The silence in his penthouse was suffocating. Back in Oakland, Jasmine sat at her desk with her team, reviewing grant applications. There was energy in the room. Women building something from nothing. Volunteers, advocates, survivors turned warriors. A bouquet of flowers arrived mid-meeting. She frowned. No card. The florist said it was anonymous, but she didn't need a name. She recognized the scent, citrus and cedar. It was the same cologne Graham had worn that night in the lounge when he kissed her like she was the first thing that ever made him feel whole. She placed the flowers in the break room and returned to her meeting without a word. Her rise didn't need romance, not yet, not unless it came with respect, accountability, and real love. Her story wasn't about him anymore. It was about her, and she was finally writing it on her terms. The private jet touched down at midnight, its sleek silver wings slicing through the fog at San Francisco International Airport. Cameras flashed in the distance. Rumors of Vanessa Sterling's return had leaked, and the vultures were circling. She emerged from the plane in full designer armor, black sunglasses despite the hour, glossy curls cascading over her fur-collared coat, heels clicking against the tarmac with precision. If anyone expected a woman defeated, they were mistaken. Vanessa had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. She would walk back into the life that had always belonged to her. She'd reclaim Graham, reclaim her status, rewrite the narrative. She was Vanessa Sterling, fiancée of one of the most powerful men in America. At least, she had been. The Maddox estate had changed. It was colder. The staff looked at her with stiff professionalism, no longer eager to please. She walked through the marble halls like a ghost returning to haunt what she once called home. Graham waited for her in the study. He didn't rise when she entered, didn't greet her, just leaned back in the leather chair, fingers steepled, blue eyes unreadable. "You're here," he said. Vanessa smiled like they were picking up where they'd left off. "You're welcome." He didn't return the smile. Instead, he tossed a folder onto the desk between them. Her Swiss bank statements, copies of flight logs, photographs of her cozying up with a man in Zurich, someone she'd claimed was just a friend. "You emptied a corporate account," he said. "Disappeared during our wedding. Let a stranger walk down the aisle in your place." Vanessa's smile flickered. "Graham? You left me to be humiliated," he cut in. "But more than that, you tried to steal from me." "From Aidan," she scoffed. "That child is not my concern." Graham stood, and this time his voice dropped lower, sharper. "Exactly. And that's why you lost." Vanessa's breath hitched. "There's nothing left for you here," he said. "Not this home, not this life, not me." "Graham, I made a mistake." "No," he said, eyes glinting. "You made a choice." Jasmine arrived just as Vanessa stormed from the study. They locked eyes in the foyer, years of tension coiling in a single breath. Vanessa's lips curved into a sneer. "Well, if it isn't the charity case turned Cinderella." Jasmine tilted her head slightly. "Still stuck on fairy tales, Vanessa?" Vanessa stepped closer, eyes sharp. "You think you've won, don't you?" Jasmine didn't flinch. "There was nothing to win. You forfeited the game. You took everything from me." "No," Jasmine said, her voice calm but deadly firm. "You gave it all away. The man, the child, the chance to have something real. You threw it away for a suitcase of cash and a European vacation." Vanessa's jaw clenched. "And now you're back," Jasmine continued, hoping to snap your fingers and have it all returned. But this isn't some movie, Vanessa. You don't get a do-over. You don't belong in this world, Vanessa spat, and you don't define who does. Jasmine stepped closer, eyes blazing. You thought I was weak. You thought I'd run. But I stayed. I built something. I gave Aiden a home when you never gave him a second thought. I didn't steal your life. You left it in ruins, and I refused to let the pieces cut me. Vanessa opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. She saw it now. Jasmine wasn't the fragile pawn she'd assumed. She was steel wrapped in grace, and unshakable. You don't scare me, Vanessa whispered. Jasmine smiled. You never did. Later that night, Jasmine stood on the balcony of her apartment, the city humming below her. Graham hadn't followed Vanessa. He hadn't called Jasmine either, but it didn't matter. She wasn't waiting anymore. She had faced the ghost, and won. Not by fighting dirty. Not by stooping to Vanessa's level, but by standing in her power. Her story had begun with stolen vows and broken promises, but every chapter since had been written by her own hand. And the next one, it was hers for the taking. The Maddox estate had never been so quiet, not even in the dead of night, when the wind whistled through the wine country. Hills and the security lights flickered across the driveway. No, it was the kind of quiet that sank deep into the bones, the kind that came when someone you needed wasn't coming back. Graham Maddox stood at the window of his study, the same place where he had once shut down deals worth billions, where he'd stared down world leaders and titans of business. But tonight, his reflection haunted him. He looked tired, hollow, powerful, yes, but profoundly alone. It had been weeks since Jasmine walked away the second time, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but love, and that made it hurt more. He had watched her rise from a frightened, veiled stranger to a woman who built a movement, a mother to his son, a force in her own right. She didn't need his money, his mansion, or his name, and somehow that made him want her more, not as a possession, but as a partner. So he made a choice, not as a billionaire, but as a man. He found her at a community event in Oakland, surrounded by laughing children, handing out hot meals with volunteers. She wore jeans and a hoodie with the Rise Up Network logo stitched across the chest. Her eyes sparkled. He almost turned around, almost let her be, but his heart wouldn't let him. She saw him before he could speak, and despite everything, her expression softened. "Graham," she said quietly. He stepped closer, ignoring the eyes on them, the whispers. "I need to talk to you," he said. She nodded once and led him around the corner, behind a food truck. Here, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the smell of garlic bread, Graham Maddox dropped to one knee. No ring, no cameras, just truth. "I want a life with you, Jasmine," he said. "Not just because you make my house feel like home, or because Aiden loves you, but because I do." Her breath caught. "I love you," he said. "I know I haven't always shown it right. I know I tried to fix everything by owning it, controlling it, buying it. But you're not a contract to be signed. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And if you'll have me, not as your savior, not as your shield, but as your equal, I'm all in." Silence. Jasmine looked at him, eyes wide, lips parted. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "I love you too," she whispered. "But that's not enough." Graham blinked. "I can't say yes just because you finally said the words," she said, voice trembling with tenderness and truth. "I need to know you can stand without needing to own everything around you, including me." He started to respond, but she held up a hand. You need to figure out who you are when you're not chasing control, when you're not trying to fix things with money or power. I want to be chosen, not claimed. Her voice cracked, but her spine stayed straight. This isn't rejection, Graham. This is love. The kind that doesn't shrink to make someone comfortable. The kind that says, do the work, and if you still want me when you're done, I'll still be standing. He looked shattered, and she looked radiant, unapologetic, free. I'm walking away, she said, but this time, it's not for survival. It's for me. She walked off without looking back. The crowd swallowed her again. Graham stayed frozen in place, breathless, knees still bent. For the first time in his life, someone had told him, and he didn't feel angry. He felt humbled and deeply, terrifyingly aware that he had to become the kind of man worthy of a woman like Jasmine Carter, not by chasing her, but by finding himself. For the first time in years, the boardroom sat empty. The corner office that once buzzed with assistants, meetings, and endless negotiations was silent. Graham Maddox had stepped away. No headlines, no press releases, just an abrupt, unexpected decision. I need time, he told his executive team. Real time. And they'd stared, stunned, because Graham Maddox didn't take breaks. He didn't walk away from billion-dollar mergers or delegate deals. He was the empire. Until now. He moved into a smaller home just outside Sausalito. No staff, no luxury security detail. Just him and Aiden. Mornings started with cereal and cartoons, not tailored suits and conference calls. They built pillow forts, went fishing, ate pizza on the floor. Aiden, once reserved and quiet, began to open up, his laughter echoing through the modest home like sunlight cracking through a long-held storm. Graham watched in awe as this boy, the son he never knew he had, slowly became his whole world. And for the first time, he let it happen. No guilt, no excuses, just love. Late at night, after Aiden was asleep, Graham sat at the edge of his bed with a tablet, scrolling through articles about Jasmine's foundation. Rise up. The numbers were modest, but the impact, enormous. There were stories, raw, real stories, of single mothers getting legal support, young women being mentored, shelters being built. And always, Jasmine's name appeared, not as a leader who demanded attention, but as someone who showed up, sleeves rolled and heart wide open. He remembered her words. You need to figure out who you are without needing to own everything around you, including me. So he funded her expansion anonymously. A quiet donation, no press, no plaques. He didn't want credit. He wanted her work to shine without his shadow. Months passed. He declined public appearances, declined interviews, until one request came through from a journalist known for soul-level profiles, not fluff. He agreed. They met at a small cafe near Golden Gate Park. No suits, no entourage, just Graham, in a grey sweater and jeans, nursing black coffee. The journalist asked the usual questions: business, legacy, future plans. But then came the final one. What changed? Graham smiled softly, almost like he'd been waiting for it. A woman, he said. The journalist's pen stilled. She walked into my life by accident, stayed by choice, and left on purpose. She showed me what it means to live for something greater than power, to love without control, to lead with compassion. She taught me that being a man of profit means nothing if you're not also a man of purpose. He paused. And I'm still trying to become the man she believed I could be. The article went viral. From tycoon to tender father, the quiet transformation of Graham Maddox. People saw him differently, not as a titan, but as human, and he liked it that way. One evening, Aidan curled up next to him, head on his chest. The boy looked up sleepily and said, "Are we happy now?" Graham's throat tightened. He nodded. "Yeah, buddy, we are." And for the first time, he didn't feel like he was faking it. He wasn't just fixing the past. He was building a future. And whether Jasmine ever came back or not, one thing was clear. He had finally become a man worthy of love. The calendar didn't lie. 1 year ago, Graham Maddox had stood at the altar waiting for a woman who never came. A wedding meant to be a society spectacle had turned into scandal. Headlines, betrayal, chaos. But today, there was no grand venue. No orchestra. No designer flowers imported from France. Just a modest park in downtown Oakland where balloons swayed in the breeze, folding chairs lined up beneath string lights, and a humble banner read, "Rise Up, celebrating 1 year of changing lives." And somewhere in the crowd, Jasmine Carter was about to speak. She stood on the small wooden stage in jeans and a soft blush blouse, her natural curls crowned high, her smile radiant. The applause that greeted her wasn't polite. It was thunderous, heartfelt. The crowd adored her. Women she'd helped, girls she'd mentored, children she'd sheltered. They all looked at her like she was more than a leader. She was a light. And as she began to speak about struggle, second chances, and the courage to rewrite your story, she didn't know that just beyond the crowd, Graham Maddox was watching her, holding Aidan's hand, and a velvet box in his pocket. Graham hadn't told her he was coming. He hadn't rehearsed a speech. He hadn't brought a photographer or planned an extravagant surprise. This wasn't about winning her back with flair. This was about showing up, because the first time he'd seen her, she'd walked down an aisle meant for someone else. This time, he was walking into her world. On her terms, Jasmine spotted him the moment she stepped off the stage. He was standing near the refreshments table. No tucks, no arrogance. Just a quiet, steady presence in a navy sweater and dark jeans. Aidan clutched his hand, eyes bright. Jasmine's breath hitched. People parted as she approached. Her pulse roared. "What are you doing here?" she asked softly, her heart pounding. Graham dropped to one knee, not for drama, not for spectacle, but because it was the only way that he knew how to speak his truth. He opened the velvet box. A simple, stunning ring sparkled inside. Not the same one from a year ago. This one was different. Smaller. Realer. Heron. "I don't need a perfect wedding," Graham said, voice steady but full of emotion. "I don't need press or power, or 1,000 guests watching us say vows. I just need you." He looked up at her, blue eyes misting. "The woman who walked into my life by accident and saved me on purpose. The mother who chose a child that wasn't hers and made him whole. The fire that burned down every illusion I had and built something better in its place." He swallowed. "I love you, Jasmine Carter. And I'm not here to promise you forever, unless forever means your dreams come first. Your voice is never silenced, and your heart is never taken for granted." He paused. "This time, I'm not asking you to be my wife to fix something broken. I'm asking you to be my partner because we built something beautiful. And I want to keep building with you." A hush fell over the park. Every eye was on her. Jasmine blinked, tears slipping down her cheeks. She looked at Aidan, whose hands were clasped like he was praying, then at Graham, who wasn't begging, just waiting. "Graham," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You showed up." "I always will," he said. And then she nodded. "Yes," she said. "Yes. Finally, yes." The crowd erupted. Aidan leapt into Jasmine's arms. Graham rose and pulled them both into a fierce embrace. It wasn't perfect. It was real. And sometimes that's better than any fairy tale. The garden wasn't grand. No cathedral ceilings, no marble fountains, no crystal chandeliers catching afternoon light. Just wildflowers swaying in the breeze, a wooden arch woven with jasmine vines, and rows of mismatched chairs filled with the very souls Jasmine had lifted. Survivors, mothers, dreamers, and their wide-eyed children who believed in magic again because of her. This was her sanctuary. And today it would become the altar of her choosing. The sun filtered through the trees in golden streaks as Jasmine stood in front of a mirror in a room once used for mentoring workshops. Now it was quiet, peaceful. The walls held stories, her stories. Pain turned into purpose, fear transformed into fire. She wore no veil. Her dress was soft ivory, simple, elegant, hugging her curves like it had been made from light and hope. Her crown, her natural curls pulled back just enough to show her face, glowing with something deeper than happiness. Peace. Outside, Graham waited at the altar. No tuxedo this time, just a tailored navy suit with no tie, a hand-picked daisy pinned to his chest. Aidan's choice. He had never looked more powerful. Not because of his wealth, but because of his stillness, his reverence. He was a man who had once tried to control everything, and now stood with empty hands and an open heart. Beside him stood Aidan, beaming in a tiny blazer and sneakers, proudly holding a velvet pouch with the rings. "I'm the best man and the ring guy," he whispered to Jasmine earlier. "That means I'm double important." She'd kissed his forehead. "You always were." As Jasmine stepped into the garden, a hush fell over the guests. But it wasn't awe for a gown, or envy for a bride. It was respect. Because everyone knew this woman had walked through fire. Not only had she survived, she had rebuilt. And now she was choosing love, on her own damn terms. She reached Graham. He didn't reach for her hand immediately. Instead, he looked into her eyes and asked, "Are you sure?" Jasmine smiled, not with giddiness, but with certainty. "More than ever," she whispered. "But this is my vow, not a fairy tale, not a performance, just truth." Graham nodded. "Then say it, your way." The officiant stepped aside. Jasmine turned to face Graham fully, her voice steady, warm. "You didn't rescue me," she began, "and I'm not here because I needed saving." A ripple of emotion moved through the crowd. "I'm here because we both got lost, and we found each other in the wreckage." Graham's eyes shimmered. "You saw me when I was veiled and scared and invisible, and I saw you when you were armored and angry and hiding. We met in a storm." She reached for his hand, "and we made a home inside it." A tear slipped down Graham's cheek. He didn't hide it. "I'm not promising to obey. I'm not promising perfection," Jasmine continued, voice fierce and full. "I'm promising partnership, growth, laughter in broken places, and love that doesn't control, but chooses." "You didn't save me, Graham." She smiled, a slow, sacred thing. "We saved each other." The garden was silent. Then Graham raised her hand to his lips and whispered, "My vow is simple, to never forget what it took for you to say yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. She slid his onto his. Aidan stood between them, grinning so wide his cheeks ached. "So, are we a family now for real?" Laughter. Tears. applause. "Yes," Jasmine whispered, pulling him into the hug as Graham wrapped his arms around both of them. "Forever. Our way. No fireworks, no headlines. But across that garden, hearts healed, lives changed, and love, true, untamed, earned love, won." The scandal never really faded. It lived on in articles buried in the corners of celebrity gossip blogs. It surfaced in whispers at elite wine country galas. People still raised eyebrows when they heard the name Jasmine Carter, the woman who wore another bride's gown, who took the billionaire by storm, who stole a wedding but saved a man. But Jasmine? She didn't flinch anymore. Because while the world remembered a scandal, she lived a revolution. The Carter Foundation headquarters buzzed with energy every morning. Paintings by local teen artists hung in the hallway. The scent of coffee and fresh lavender floated through open windows. Women gathered in circles, some laughing, some healing, all rising. Jasmine stood at the heart of it. She wore tailored blazers with high-top sneakers, held meetings with mayors and teenagers in the same breath. She wasn't just a founder. She was a movement. Her voice, once small and silenced, was now broadcast through panels, interviews, and podcasts. And her story, it was no longer about scandal. It was about survival turned legacy. Graham Maddox still made headlines too, just different ones now. He'd stepped back from the spotlight, appointed fresh leadership at his tech empire, shifted focus to venture philanthropy and education. He served on Jasmine's board as an advisor, but never as a puppet master. He'd learned to lead by listening, and he was proud of that. Even prouder of being a dad. Aiden was 9 now, brighter than a comet and twice as fast. He played piano, skateboarded like a daredevil, and had a love for vintage comic books, especially the ones where the underdog always won. He called Jasmine Mom without a hesitation, and every time he did, her heart cracked at wider open and sealed back stronger. Their daughter, Nova Carter Maddox, arrived on a Thursday morning with a full head of curls and lungs that could shatter glass. She was fierce from the moment she entered the world. Jasmine held her and whispered, "You're not a princess. You're a fire starter." Graham kissed her forehead and added, "And we'll never dim your flame." They named her Nova because she was a burst of light born from cosmic chaos, because she was proof that even after destruction, beauty explodes into existence. They lived in a brownstone with wide steps and ivy-covered walls. There was no iron gate or 10-car garage, just a backyard where Aiden and Nova painted cardboard castles, and the air always smelled like jasmine in bloom. Sometimes Jasmine and Graham sat on the porch swing late at night. No words, just the rhythm of breath, the creak of the swing, the warmth of legs tangled under a shared blanket. No cameras, no chaos, just home. People asked sometimes, did they ever regret it? The way it started? The chaos? The pain? Jasmine would smile and say, "Regret is for people who stayed small." Graham would add, "Everything worth keeping starts with a risk." And once, when Nova was old enough to ask how her parents fell in love, Jasmine told her this. "It wasn't magic, baby. It was messy, and brave, and real." She tucked Nova into bed, kissed her brow, and said, "Fairy tales end at weddings. But real love, real powerful love, starts the morning after. And it lasts." She paused, smile deepening. "As long as you protect it with truth and fire." The final image? A family beneath the sunrise. Jasmine standing in her garden with Nova on her hip, Aiden sketching superheroes under the tree, and Graham setting down his phone to pick up a watering can. No gold, no castles, just a love that burned clean through every lie the world tried to bury them with. And rose, unapologetically, forever, with fire.